All right, we love reconnecting a webcam and eating in the middle of recording and absolutely destroying the audio because there's a high pitch ringing on the stupid webcam. Let's get started. I absolutely love Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It was my first TTRPG and it was truly my first love. It brought me into the world of TTRPGs and got me to absolutely fall in love with the storytelling I was already good at, the improv I was already good at, the way I was good at, like, the mechanics and figuring out, like, an encounter or something like that, and truly being able to put myself more into, like, the acting world that I loved, and being able to tell the stories that I wanted to tell and, like, do the weird fantasies in my head. I love TTRPGs, and D&D is the reason for that. I have played for years. I have DM'd several things, like a full-length campaign that ended up not actually having an ending necessarily, but, you know, it had a halfway ending and then it kind of fell apart, but whatever. I'm also the type of DM who's made a lot of monsters and magic items, abilities. I've made a rogue subclass before. I've done it all, man. I've spent way too much time on D&D, and honestly, the skill list in my head, like, I find it weird when I'm like, oh, where is this skill in the system? Oh, it's not there? That's weird. It should be in there. How can I use insight in this moment? It's a problem, honestly. But I love D&D. And I want to make that very clear because I no longer love it like I once did. It is still an amazing system, and if there were a game where I was invited to it and had a very strong identity and I had a very strong idea for a character, I would love to be in a 5th edition game. But I since have found a better, newer version for me system, Pathfinder 2nd edition. Again, this is my opinion, and I'm not saying that D&D is bad. At their core, Pathfinder and D&D 5e are kind of the same thing, but there is a lot of systems that Pathfinder does better than D&D, and sometimes D&D does something better than Pathfinder, and I want to very much tell you how it is and where one does something right and where one does something that I don't care for as much. And to be very clear, I used to be one of those people on Reddit who were like, shut up about Pathfinder, it's too complicated, blah, blah, blah. But coming out as somebody who has now DMing their third Pathfinder game, yeah, I just kind of thought it was hard and I didn't understand it immediately, so I thought that other people were trying to, like, force it on me. But honestly, people were just sharing their passion for a thing and really truly trying to get people to see that Pathfinder does a lot of the same things as D&D, just better and more cohesive. Pathfinder is the most cohesive system I've ever seen in my life, and I don't think it will be topped. Maybe ever. Maybe Starfinder 2 will be better, but Pathfinder 2e is an amazing system. Amazing. And keep in mind cohesiveness. It's going to come up again and again. We're going to split this up into maybe 6 or 7 parts. We're going to go over the basics, minor differences. It's probably going to move over with combat stuff, and then we're going to go into character options. We're going to go into the differences in the combat as well, tools for GMing, and then major differences in other miscellaneous infos, and then a secret third thing at the end if you stick around. Make sure to like and subscribe too. Insert graph here that I'm too small of a YouTuber to have. And I'm really not trying to make this an hour long, so let's get right into it and not waste any more time. Pathfinder and D&D are both, at their core, the same game. They're both D20 systems. They both use D20 sided dice for most things, and they use other dice sizes for their damage and other calculations and stuff. The main thing is that they both have classes, subclasses, and races / species / ancestries. I'll probably call them ancestries or species. Sometimes I slip and I still call them races, even though that's not really what they are, but that's just how they've been called for so long. It's just etched into the brain sometimes, you know. Pathfinder has a lot of differences in terms of actual mechanics and not so much the actual core of the game. They both have hit points and AC and initiative and DCs, which is difficulty checks, attack rolls, saving throws, skills, proficiency, character speed. They have unconscious and dying conditions. They have a bunch of other conditions, and they are calced very, very differently. And ultimately, they are minor numbers differences, right? So HP in Pathfinder is a set number that is added for once for your the health of your ancestry, once for the health of your class and your constitution modifier, and every time you level up, it goes up by the class and constitution number. That's it, end of story. Which sounds like you're getting a max on a D10 like every time, plus your constitution modifier, which sounds like a lot more HP than it actually is, because Pathfinder is very cohesive. Everything scales with you. So everything at level 1 is set to the difficulty of this is level 1. Everything at level 2 is set to the difficulty of this is at level 2, and so on and so forth. Proficiency scales like a +2 every level. Everything gets better with proficiency because it all kind of ties back into it. Your AC gets better. Your skills get better, which in turn is your initiative, because for the most part you roll perception for initiative, but you can use other skills for it too, like stealth or maybe intimidation, especially in like a social combat, which I'll get to because it's so good. Social combat's so good. And your DCs are pretty much the same level, but they feel different than D&D because they're actually scaled to the number that works in Pathfinder. Like everything makes sense mathematically in Pathfinder, where in D&D it nothing is very cohesive. It's all like very specifically character based, and if you are built a certain way, you're going to have a vastly different difficulty doing certain things than even the same PC who's supposed to be relatively the same at it. Like a +10 is very different in Pathfinder than it is to D&D, especially since HP in D&D is so much loaded on the monster side that the damage is also a lot higher. Like the number is bigger, but the impact is ultimately less than Pathfinder. Like a +1 in Pathfinder is very significant because you critically hit and critically miss on a +10 and -10 respectively from the DC, which is really, really important. Your +1s are going to swing the tide of a battle very consistently. You want to have good team composition. You want to have a lot of buffs. You want to put debuffs on the enemy so they have minuses to their things. You want to manipulate action economy. And that sounds like a lot, but moment to moment gameplay, especially if you've played 5e before, it's really not that big of a difference. And something in Pathfinder and in D&D that kind of like is weird is like speed calculations, which also get into like action economy as well, is that in Pathfinder, if you want to move, you have to spend an action to do so, which does sound like a lot, but actually it's not as bad as you think it is, because you get 3 actions for everything. Everyone gets 3 actions in Pathfinder. It just depends on how you use them. And some things are 2 actions, some things are 3 actions. And Pathfinder, because of this, moves a lot faster than D&D, because you're not trying to say, oh, I need to use my full action for this thing right here and get my 5 attacks or do the specific spell, and I can't do anything else because I got nothing. Or it's not like save or suck kind of stuff. Like sometimes with spellcasters, because a lot of their bigger spells are like 2, sometimes 3 actions, and sometimes with like the extra abilities of like martials as well. But ultimately, because the impact is all controlled, it all feels like everything you do is worth it in the end, even if you're unlucky. Like being unlucky in both systems is hard, but I think it feels worse in D&D because, you know, you get those like really long turns where people have no idea what to do because the stakes are like so high. In Pathfinder, that almost never happens because the action system is supposed to be very even, and you're relying on your party a lot more tactically than you are on what you can do individually. Once you get used to Pathfinder, combat goes like literally twice as fast as D&D. Sometimes like 5 times as fast, especially if you have like a slow group and they're not really used to the combat or whatever. It's just so much easier. Which also, along with the action system, is your attack rolls. Every time you want to attack, you get 1 action to attack once, and that's it. Attacking another time, I think like you only get multiple attacks on 1 attack action as like a monk or something, and then apart from that, every time you spend an additional action to make another attack, whatever it is, you're going to have a penalty to that because you're basically just flailing your weapon around, essentially, is the argument. I know in real life it's not the real life physics, but in terms of the actual game mechanics, it makes sense. And by the time you get to your 3rd attack action, you probably are better spent doing something else, like raising your shield, like moving into a more advantageous position. And nothing is more complicated, nothing is more complex, nothing is more difficult, but you have to think a little bit more tactically, and the mechanics actually help you do that instead of just leaving you out to dry. But Pathfinder 1e and then Pathfinder 2e, which is based off Pathfinder 1e, is based off of 3 and 3.5 D&D. So ultimately the differences are not actually that different. These are all like very basic minor differences that are like mostly dealing with like the action system and the proficiency systems, which in my case, I think Pathfinder takes the win here. D&D, it feels very impactful, and you get to do the huge power fantasy thing, like when you have the really big action that swings the tide. But ultimately, I think Pathfinder overall, moment to moment, action to action, is going to feel a lot better and a lot smoother, and like you're having an equal impact on your team. And there is a little bit of the martial caster debate, but honestly, in Pathfinder, because everybody has their own niche and is very built into the party composition, I think that Pathfinder does this portion just that much better, just that much cohesive than D&D. And so we're going to move on to our character options next. Go, Passu, go. I just realized my other microphone was on, so hopefully all of that was saved and is not terrible. Options. Character options. This is my main drive when I wanted to go in Pathfinder, and why when I was invited to do a 5e one-shot or be invited to one to play in it, even though I had 5e character sheets lying around, or it was very easy to make a 5e character, and I could throw one together very easily after years of doing it on the fly. Going back to D&D after Pathfinder hurts me physically. It is a genuine struggle to me trying to figure out what to play in 5e nowadays. If I am not greatly interested in the story, if I'm not greatly interested in what is being presented to me as an idea that is new or interesting, then I am not going to be able to make a 5e character, because ultimately 5e has like no options for fucking anything. Really, the only options you have are what species do you play, what class do you play, and what subclass in that class do you play. And those are great options, but that's it. That's all you get. Sometimes you get like one feat, but honestly the feats are so little, and they're so clearly correct options in D&D. It's very, very hard as somebody who likes mechanics, as somebody who likes playing D&D not just for roleplay, because I can do that in other systems, which I'll get to later, by myself. It's very hard for me to go looking at D&D 5th edition and going, okay, what is something I can dig my fangs into, mechanically speaking? And really, there's not much. Like, if you're gonna play a druid, you might as well play spell druid or moon druid, because if you don't, what are you doing? Like, who plays wildfire druid? You know what I mean? Stars druid is cool, but like, it's not objectively as good as any other druid. Your sorcerer, you get so few spells, and the abilities usually aren't worth it. So like, I mean, I guess celestial patron, what? Divine Soul? That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, Divine Soul is good with its healing, and Wild Magic is fun, and that's probably why that is so popular, because you don't know what you're gonna get. It's the most interesting one. There's just not a lot of options for character stuff in D&D. And the races, don't get me wrong, all of them are unique, and their individuality is why I think for a long time I didn't like the races in Pathfinder 2nd edition, but at the same time, I just feel like, well, actually, you know what? I'll leave it to D&D. They do species correctly. They do it right. I do like the individuality of the species in D&D. I think that Pathfinder actually has a worse pool and less of a reason to not just pick human, because kind of all of them are human, but the individuality is more so in your heritage or your ancestry backgrounds and the extra feats you get. See, Pathfinder has a lot more options for your character, and there is no correct option. Every option is, like the rest of the system, cohesive. Every option is good. Every option is usable. Every option is valid. And that's really, really impressive coming from D&D. Now, with things like spells and things like a game like this, there are obviously going to be things that are better or worse depending on the situation. But overall, in general, like character option, classes, subclasses, stuff that's actually going to put you on a good foot because Pathfinder is built the way it is, and also because it emphasizes more of a team composition rather than D&D, where you could honestly just make it with 5 bards. The way you play Pathfinder 2nd Edition is both a team game and the individualist's fantasy. You get the best of both worlds, I think. Now, again, the races are not as interesting individually, but if you dive into like ancestry and like having a build with it, or not even a build, just like what would be cool to be right now, there are things that make them different, and probably more different than D&D, but not so much so that it's better than D&D, I think. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, everything is viable. And I think that my point here is that there is an amount of feats in Pathfinder. There are archetypes and things instead of multi-classes. Like, you don't need to go into a multi-class for an archetype. There is like probably 4 times the amount of things that are archetypes of like, this is a specific thing you want to do, and they're all useful and viable. They're all pretty much good. Now, the general skill feats I think are the most boring things in the world, and they are so hard to pick, and I wish they were more useful, but there are so many of them. It is very specific to your character at the very least. So when you know what you want, you got it. Another thing I like that D&D doesn't do is lore skills. Lore skills are intelligence-based skills like lore, like warfare lore. Is your character a warrior? Great, they might have warfare lore. Do they sew? Do they have specific like this magical item shop stuff lore, this specific part of the world? Do they have lore that they can work out? And there's also society checks. Like, there's different skills that just make you feel more like you are mechanically playing your character, which I think is very fun and very useful for characters of all walks of life. I think it is very fun to be able to have a character that is very strong in your mind, and then also having mechanics to support that instead of having it all offloaded on your brain, especially because there are times when you don't necessarily know, even if you're a great storyteller, even if you're a professional actor, even though you're an improv king like Brennan Lee Mulligan, or the people on D20, or the people in Critical Role, there are a lot of instances where you are just not in the right headspace, and sometimes you have to look at your notes, sometimes you have to look at your character sheet, and you're like, okay, what is the thing I can do? What am I good at? Like, what would make the most sense for me right now? And you're not always going to be right on top of everything. And I think the more that the mechanics can support and help the character growth, the more rooted in the reality of the game, and not just in your head and the fantasy of the group story that is a little bit more nebulous and a little bit more hard to define because you're doing it live. I think the mechanics help ground each character and make it easier to roleplay. And of course, easier to operate in combat as well, because your mechanics also all work in combat. You can do skill checks and skill actions in combat that are very, very specifically tied to the things you're good at. Like, if you are trained, if you are master, if you are legendary, if you're expert, which, by the way, you can upgrade your skill tiers in this game too, which is also awesome. So even if you're good at something, like, you get expertise, or you get double expertise, or you get triple expertise on top of that, which is just doubling your proficiency and not the actual thing itself. So it's more of like a 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 every single level. You get to be the character exactly as you want, because the deeper it's like a big skill tree, right? There's a lot of different options and ways to go, and they all kind of connect back in on each other, but no skill tree is going to look exactly the same as one who's even like another person in your party who is very similar role to you, which it probably will not even happen, because Pathfinder is built to have people who can do different things and are good at different things. And there are definitely, it's not required, it's not gonna like kill you necessarily, but there are ways in which different classes are going to help each other better than an all champion party. Let's say an all champion party, you might die, but if you have a couple of champions, you know, you're probably fine. And champions are paladins, by the way. They're like defensive paladins. I also very much like how the attribute system works. It is not just, you don't roll anything in Pathfinder. Everything starts at 10, and then your ancestry, your class, your subclass's key attribute or the class's key attribute, and your level all get attribute bonuses. And it is similar to D&D, like ABI, is that what it's called? Where at certain levels, like every 5 levels in Pathfinder, you get attribute bonuses as well. But it is just +1s when you opt for it. Like you get a +1, so like if you're a strength fighter, you just automatically get a +1 in, even if you don't, even if you're a strength fighter and for some reason you're one of those guys who are like, I'm gonna dump strength, which is not a great or interesting choice, by the way. But just saying, you're going to get a +1 in that anyway. And you can take flaws, which are like -1s. So like you can fully take minuses if you want to. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But I think the actual building of it makes a little bit more sense and at least guarantees that you're going to get a +3 or a +4 off the bat. If you specialize that way, right? Like you can very easily get a +4 in something and have another like +3 and a couple +2s, and then another one might be a +1, and then like the other 1 or 2 is going to be a +0. And you're not going to be necessarily bad at anything, but good luck succeeding on literally anything if you have a +0. It is truly luck of the die at that point. But the more specialized you are, the more attributes you have, the better your skills are, the more consistent you are going to be, and the more critical successes you're going to get on those skill checks and the attacks and all that stuff. So I think it's very much build who you are kind of system. Don't necessarily leave it up to the dice. I mean, like, I'm sure you can. I think leaving it up to the dice is fun in D&D as well, but also it is not fun when you can't do anything in Dungeons & Dragons, especially since the system is not cohesive like Pathfinder. Like not everything builds off of each other and takes everything into consideration. Dungeons & Dragons is, I think, the randomness is fun. Rolling an 18 at level 1 and then like a 17 and a 16 and a 15. Amazing. I love being overpowered. Everyone likes a power fantasy, right? But when you get a shit roll and you just can't re-roll it, and it's like one of those things where the dungeon is like, you could probably skip by on that, right? Or you decide to take it well, and then like halfway through you're like, I wish I could do things well. I wish I wasn't a burden on my party more than anything. You know, it's just not as fun for me. Which I actually, now going into combat differences, I realized that a lot of the overlap has already happened. There's like some damage immunities, like intricacies. There's like inspiration versus hero points. Hero points is like you spend 1 to reroll, you get the 1 at the start of every session raw, and your dungeon master can give out hero points like inspiration, but inspiration is almost useless in Dungeons & Dragons. It's like add a d6 or use it for re-rolling a check once if you remember to give it out, if you give it out, and it's not that useful. But hero points, again, Pathfinder, cohesiveness, name of the game. 1, you get to re-roll any skill check if you try to before, you have to say that you're doing it before you get the result, I'm pretty sure. The rules is written, I'm pretty sure. And then you re-roll it and you get rid of 1 of your 3 hero points if you have them. There's up to 3 hero points you can have at any given time. Or you can save them. And because dying in Pathfinder is actually easier, you can save at least 1 of your hero points and spend it when you go down to automatically come back up and just clear your dying conditions. It's very, very useful. I don't know if you actually come back up or you stabilize. I haven't looked at that rule in a while because I haven't killed anybody yet, but good system. Something else that I have wanted in D&D for so long, social combat. I love that there is a social combat system in this game. The fact that it's in this game and it was taken into consideration and social encounters are a thing in Pathfinder makes me so happy that somebody made rules for it and you don't just have to make it up on the spot and feel like you're a game designer as a dungeon master when you're doing so much on top of everything else, like the story and building out encounters and all this stuff. Like, you don't also have to make a system to build out an encounter on top of that. The social combat's already there. Whether you're doing interrogation, whether you're at a masquerade and you're trying to impress people, whether you're in a king's court and you're trying to like suss out like different bad actors and things, there is a lot of different ways to use social combat, and it's It's so fun. So fun. Especially like when people have different approaches to interrogation, and like the dice get to tell the story of like how this person responds to different things. And weirdly, again, mechanics influencing story and story influencing mechanics, I have found interesting ways to build out people's personalities that I wasn't necessarily expecting because of social combat interrogations. Like, if someone is not responding well to pain, maybe they're better at diplomacy, and maybe it's not diplomacy, maybe they like have a certain bribe or something, and you don't know that until the dice are coming out and you're really like, oh, well, I guess they're not responding well to this, so maybe try a different approach, you know? Like, maybe they're not responding well to intimidation. Is it that? And you get to have your turn as well. You take a turn after every PC has gone in the social combat, and you get to decide everybody's like reactions and things and what they say in response. Look, you can go look up the actual rules yourself, especially since I know this for DMs is mostly what this is for. But listen, you gotta look it up. It's so good. I've been holding this out for long enough. I've tried to not talk about it, but can we please talk about CR? Oh my fucking god. CR is one of the worst systems I think I've ever seen. Just end of sentence. In anything. Not even TTRPGs. Just any system whatsoever. It makes no fucking sense. And also, there was a thing, I don't even know if this is true necessarily, but I heard that the CR that Wizards of the Coast use to actually calculate their monsters and put in the DMG is a different system than the CR system that is put in the DMG for us to use to calculate encounters. Oh my god, what are you using? Because give it to us, because we want to know how to balance this game correctly. It's so hard to make something that makes sense and is like, okay, I'm going for this level of difficulty. Is this actually gonna be this level of difficulty? Or do I have to put in 5 years of experience to even have an entry-level position in the job? You know what I mean? CR makes no sense because HP, AC, damage, amount of attacks, other abilities, not cohesive whatsoever. Every monster of every CR level has a completely different, like, they have a ballpark, here's what maybe you should aim for, and like there's 5e tools, like there's calculators online and stuff that like kind of get you there, and like if you have enough time with your party and you know what they're capable of, you can give them a challenge that is unique to them if you're good at doing that. But the problem is that D&D itself as a system does not help you doing that at all. Not a chance. Like, obviously a CR1 versus a level 20 party is going to be a goddamn blowover. But if you're level 5 and you throw a CR7 at somebody, it really depends on what CR7 you're throwing at them, because could be a black dragon, it might wipe them. But if it's like a bunch of little guys, it could also wipe them, or they could destroy them, especially if you have a wizard in the party who has fireball at this level. Like, boom, you're gone. Like, 2 CR7 encounters are completely different, right? And it's very swingy. So you kind of really have to judge case by case by case. And CR at that point might as well not exist. But what I love in Pathfinder, and cohesiveness is the key, everything in Pathfinder has its place. You can calculate encounters with level or with just proficiency bonus as well. And for every level the PCs are, you know exactly how much experience you're going to use and how hard it's going to be. It's not perfect, I will say. If you're expecting a severe encounter to be difficult or challenging, that's not always the case. It depends on what the severe encounter is. The more action something has, action economy, you hear this a lot about in D&D, but it's true in Pathfinder as well. A single thing that's supposed to be severe is going to be a lot less threatening than a couple of lower level enemies at a severe encounter, because they have more actions to work with, and overall they're going to have better luck, they're going to be more consistent, and especially if there's more of them than the party, they can probably overwhelm and do more damage than even like a very hard boss type encounter by himself, right? This is why bosses have minions, to kind of levy out, because as soon as you get the boss alone and it's not that difficult of a boss, that thing's going down in a round or two, and you better believe. And that's true in D&D, that's true in Pathfinder. So there is a little leeway, there is a little bit of getting used to, but at the very least, you can throw a level 4 monster at a level 3 party and you can just have a good encounter. That's a good combat right there. You're good. You don't have to do much else. You just can throw on, like, there's a calculator and I will leave the link below, but you throw in that calculator, you're right. If you have Foundry, please get Foundry for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I mean, even for 5e2, it's so much better than anything else. Roll20, my best friend's computer, Roll20 freezes. I don't know how it freezes. I don't know why it freezes. That is not a powerful website, but the optimization on Roll20 is horrible. The character sheets, bad. The monster sheets, bad. Organization, bad. You have to pay extra to, like, you have to do a subscription service to even have, like, good lighting or something. Insane. Foundry, get it. It's $50. You just have it forever. You get all your systems. You get a bunch of stuff. You're going to be great. It's going to be fine. And you're going to have so much room to play with. You can make dungeons. You can have walls. You can have windows. You can have secret doors. You can have dynamic lighting. You can have animated maps. You can have, like, sounds in game when you go up to a river and you hear the river on the actual system itself. Foundry's amazing. Get Foundry. It's only $50 and then you just have it forever. It's awesome. Get Foundry. So in Foundry, when you load everything into a combat state on Foundry, it'll show you, hey, this is severe encounter, or like, hey, this is extreme, like, here's how much experience this is. And also there are elite and weak versions of every enemy in the game. So you can bring it down a level, you can bring it up a level if you want, like, a stronger version of it or a weaker version of it. Like if something's injured, like an injured owlbear, just bring the level down one. It's fine. Or if you want, like, big mama owlbear, make it elite, bring it up a level. And you can do it in Foundry at a click of a button. It's very, very easy. And also, the thing that I have been trying to do in D&D for the life of me, for literally since I started playing D&D, is having characters, NPCs, that are not as powerful as, like, that are not more powerful than the players and do not steal their spotlight, but have actual character levels, right? And you don't have to approximate through a monster stat block, like, because PCs in D&D are very different than monsters, they are very much made differently. So you can't really just have an NPC that is a character, and I mean, you can do it as rivals, sure, but as a monster that's like the same level, you might kill that party if you have those NPCs. So just fair warning, the HP and damage calculations are very, very different. And so in Pathfinder, because it's all by level and everything is cohesive and the proficiency system works throughout everything, you can just make normal player character sheets and run them normally, and it'll work like any monster of that level. It'll just work. Obviously, certain challenges are going to be different, like a barbarian's going to be a different challenge than a wizard, of course, because hit points and spells and all that. But that is just going to be the different challenges that come with a D20 adventure system with different classes in it. That's the same for 5e, that's the same for Pathfinder. You're just going to have to figure it out. But you're not going to have like this is a level 7 character, how does this translate to CR? Oh, this is like maybe CR12, maybe, but CR12 is actually way more because the hit points are way higher and the damage, although the same, it's like you're never gonna kill that CR12 ever. I've done this before. I'm saying that because I've done this, like trying to scale an NPC as a CR monster as a PC doesn't work. Don't do it. Don't do it in 5e. You're gonna absolutely ruin the balance of your game if you're even trying to do that. So just don't do that and have them be narrative, or just run an actual PC sheet and just be like, hey, this is how this is gonna work. It's just another PC. Yeah, just don't do it. But in Pathfinder, you can do it and it's balanced. They're going to be matches for each other, or at least somewhere around. Like, obviously one's leveled a level lower than the other one, then they're gonna be at a disadvantage or whatever. You get it. Archives of Nethys has literally everything on it. Use it. It has 1E, it has 2E, it has Starfinder. I'm sure it'll have Starfinder 2 when it comes out, which I'm very much looking forward to that. But it is a team of independent people. I'm sure Archives of Nethys is a godsend, and I'm so glad it exists. And if it didn't exist, I don't know how I would know anything about this system, to be honest with you. Which, here's my critique of Pathfinder. D&D has all of its rules where you're looking at the ability, where you're looking at the spell, where you're looking at the feat. Everything is exactly where you need it to be when you're looking at it. However, in Pathfinder, a lot of the knowledge of the rules is front end. You have to know how the rules works before you get to character sheet, before you get to monsters, because it's all in the book, you know? It's all first, and then you get to actually building things. And you use what you build, and then you like have a specific action here, and it won't tell you exactly what it does, so you have to like know the rule first. That is annoying. It's a bit of a learning curve. You have to get used to it, like all things. But in D&D, it is easier to actually know exactly what a thing is going to do when you're reading it, instead of being like, what was that rule again? I haven't used that in like 3 sessions. Or I haven't used that since the last game because no one was this character before. So like, how does this work? You just have to know the rules. So there is a little bit more of a learning curve with it, because you can't just throw a character sheet at somebody and have them know exactly what they're doing. They actually do have to be taught the rules. They can't just jump into it exactly like D&D. They can, but having somebody there who knows the rules very well is going to help a lot. And Pathfinder is also one of those systems where knowing the rules is actually worth it, because the better you are with the rules, the more you can actually not exploit, but use them to your advantage and actually succeed well in combats and things like that. Oh, I would also leave below for my homebrew people out there, if you don't have a monster like in the bestiary that you can use, that you like have in mind, or for the people who don't want to use NPCs but don't like the bestiary stuff, down below is a website that will take you. I think you have to sign up for it first, but that website is going to give you a way to very easily homebrew monsters. Very, very, very good. Go look at it. Another thing is that there are free archetype rules. So if you want to do archetypes and you don't want to like give up some of your feats for it, which is how it usually works, then if you don't want to give up your class feats for an archetype stuff, which you can do even if you have free archetype, you can just at like 2, 4, 6, 8, I'm pretty sure, you can just use that for an archetype, for a multi-class, whatever it is, you know? I think that's really cool. Again, more character options. Yeah, good stuff. There's also like a relics system. There's like half level stuff that I think my friend came up with, and I will put a screenshot of what it is right now. Fun stuff. And also deities have rules. Deities have rules to them. They have edicts and anathema, whatever you want to say, things. And they have like boons and curses that work out. And this is actually one of my favorite D&D characters that I've had of all time. Mr. Lord Corey Webb, who was a noble in Kingmaker, that adventure path, and he was a person who got cursed by Saren Ray to never tell a lie, besides a mission of the truth, and he was also turned into a tiefling, a Nephilim, if you will, and that was a very fun character, and I loved playing with like using curses is like another thing of like mechanics informing character, which, hey, if I ever get on D20, I know what I'm arguing. There's also other differences, like healing and resting is not the same. Like there's treat wounds, and there are short rests, like short 10 minutes rests only give you like a couple of hit points, so you actually have to do treat wounds or like to actually heal up for the day. There's spellcasting and alchemical crafting differences. Like every class has their own, like I think there's 4 forms of spellcasting. There's spontaneous, there's prepared, there's focus points, there's a lot more deep stuff, deep systems. Honestly, the best one, there's no Electrum in PF2E. There's just copper, silver, gold, and platinum. So no Electrum is just Bitcoin jokes in your Pathfinder games, but you can still use it if you want to. I don't know why you would, but hey, cheers to that. So for my final thoughts, I didn't actually compliment D&D as much as I thought I was going to. I do like it. I do genuinely like it. I just feel like there's so much in Pathfinder that it just does so much better. It does the same things better than D&D, and it is, at the core, they are very similar, and there's not actually that much when you're in the thick of it that is going to be that different. So as a player, besides like the character option stuff and like building a character, like if you throw me a character sheet and go, hey, here's a very interesting concept, I'm gonna have just as much of a good time. And I think that's kind of where I'm stuck, because if I'm going to be playing a game that has deep combat that is supposed to be a very like tactical game, then I'm going to use Pathfinder. If I want something that's going to have deep character options and a lot of mechanics and cohesiveness that's built well, Pathfinder is much more that game than D&D ever is. And you always have the joke in D&D of like, hey, you are only really working around level 5 to level 12, and basically at any other point you are waiting to get to that point, and past that point there's no balance. You're killing everything, right? And that like as long as you're level 5, there's the joke of like you can't kill your party, which is not true, but like the stuff you have at your disposal from level 5 to level 12 is where most things operate, because that's where the game actually works the best. That's the meat of the game. But Pathfinder works like your best sessions of D&D at every level. They all work. Now, of course, the character options are going to be deeper and you're going to have more things at your disposal as you level up, of course. But you're not going to die to a bunch of goblins because you have 4 hit points at level 1 and nothing to your name but 1 spell slot. Or you're not gonna kill literally everything that is more powerful than you that by like 5 levels because you're level 20 and that's just how that works. Especially since Pathfinder has monsters that are scaled correctly, and things that are like several orders of magnitude above level 20 are going to actually be an intense challenge and require a lot of strategy. Not that I've played that high, not that I've played higher than level 4 or 5, but as a DM, I can just inherently know that from the system because that's how the system works. I also was going to talk about that Brennan Mulligan controversy that happened a little while ago, and I don't exactly remember what he said, but it was something along the lines of like the simulation part of the system that like he's good at certain things and he wants the system to do the things that he's not good at. And I completely agree with him here, and I don't know why people were up in arms about what he was saying. If someone can remind me, I can't find it for the life of me. But point being, he was completely right. I thought that when he said that, and that was before I was even playing Pathfinder. Pathfinder does the things that I am not good at, right? Pathfinder has the things that are going to give you deep combat. I mean, D&D does as well. It has the great combat systems. It has everything like that. It's going to give you the rules to the game. And it's not going to tell you how to roleplay. It's not going to tell you how to write your story. It's not going to tell you how to do the things that you should probably just be doing on your own. And if that's problematic to you, then I'm sorry, but I don't know if this hobby is the right one for you, or at least the one that people on the internet talk about is supposed to be for everybody, or that's what the hobby is nowadays in its most popular form. You of course can go and do OSR style stuff, right? But I think where this deviates for me is ultimately Pathfinder 2e is amazing, and I do love it, but it's not my favorite TTRPG in the world. I don't actually know if I have a favorite, but maybe Vampire the Masquerade, but my favorite genre is not the complex. As much as I like mechanics, they are good for the game that they are good for. What I actually like more than Pathfinder, more than D&D, are rules-light systems. The flexibility of having just a bunch of skills and going and just doing whatever your heart desires and not having to worry about complex mechanics and is this balanced and how much prep do I have to do because I have to make 5 encounters in a dungeon and all this stuff, which you don't even have to do in Pathfinder anyway, but that's what the game is for. And I very much believe that the system should reflect the type of game you're actually running and the type of game you're playing, just like how I think you should have players that fit the type of story you're telling in the game you're playing. Rules-light systems are very good for doing literally everything else. I'm trying to do a cyberpunk game, like partially modern, partially sci-fi cyberpunk game in Pathfinder right now, and the amount of things I have to make on my own is astounding. And that's not for lack of things to do and how easy it is in Pathfinder to make things. And not for my love of homebrew and making my own monsters and my own items and stuff like that and making my own rules and just saying, hey, this is just our game, it's just a home game, let's just do it on the spot and figure it out. It is just so much work on top of just trying to figure out what's going to happen the next session as well, to then have to build everything and not just be able to pull something from the bestiary, right? When you just want to tell a collaborative story and your focus is not necessarily on combat, there is not much of a reason to choose Pathfinder over a system like, say, Fate or even a basic storytelling system. There's a lot of systems where I like the rules light more because it's just easier to get off the ground. It's easier to think about it in terms of what's actually going to happen and what's going to make the most sense, rather than what are the mechanics saying is supposed to happen in this moment. And I think that's, as it's coming to me, I think that's also what Brendan was saying, is like, sometimes the dice get in the way of what I'm trying to do. So why would I want dice to be in the way of the thing I'm good at and the thing I know in my head I'm going to do well? Because I'm not a battle simulator. I don't know how these battles work. So I'm going to use a system that's going to make the battles realistic so that I can tell my story easily. So I don't have to think about the story. Well, so that I can think about the story and I don't have to gamify it when it's unnecessary. And that to me is why ultimately I enjoy these systems more than Pathfinder, and why I enjoy Pathfinder more than 5e is because I am a storyteller at heart. But goddamn, I love a good sword fight. I love me a good magic spell, and I love a goddamn good interrogation scene. Seriously, social combat might be one of the best things to come out of Pathfinder, honestly. More systems could use a social combat. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, I'm almost done with my lo mein, but thank you guys so much for watching. It has been Lord Zuko. This has been, as I'm recording this is an hour, 20 minutes of footage. So hopefully I can get this down to less than 30 minutes. Probably not, though. Maybe. It's certainly possible. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. I'm sure stuff is going to come soon. I'm not sure what it is yet, but it's whatever I want to make. And if you like me, you like my music, please go check that out as well. Hopefully music coming soon. New music coming soon. I don't know at this point. We're just going to have to figure it out and see. So thank you again so much for watching, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Zuko out, baby!